When my sister-in-law laughed at my simple dress, I felt small for a moment. Then I remembered why I chose it. Before I take you into that room with me, can I ask you something kind, from one heart to another? Smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Thank you for being here. Your presence makes the room feel softer. We were standing at the doorway of the community hall, where the lights were a little yellow and the floor had a tired shine. I could smell cinnamon from the kitchen and hear the easy clatter of plates. Everyone called it a family party, just a simple gathering with cake and tea. But I knew something they did not know. Tonight was more than a family party. I was wearing a plain dress I had stitched with my own hands. The fabric was soft and the pockets were deep, the way I like them. It was not a dress that shouted. It was a quiet dress, the kind that lets you breathe. And it held more than fabric and thread. It held a small, brave promise to myself. Please know this is not a story about payback. I'm not here to shame my sister-in-law or anyone else. I love my family, even when their words land hard. I am here to tell you about patience and purpose and a gentle moment I did not expect to be brave enough to claim. I am here to tell you about a little curtain in the corner of that hall and what waited behind it. At the door, my sister-in-law looked me up and down and laughed in that quick, careless way people do when they want to fill the air. "So plain," she said, teasing, her hand brushing the sleeve. I felt my face grow warm. I took a slow breath and remembered my mother's hands guiding a seam, steady and sure. My husband touched my elbow and whispered, "You look like yourself," and I let those words hold me up. I want you to walk with me into that room. I want you to hear the forks against plates and the soft, private jokes. I want you to see the small stack of paper bags by the wall and the curtain I had pinned shut with 2 silver clips. I want you to know that the dress I wore was not a mistake, and this night was not an accident. It was a quiet reveal waiting for the right breath, the right pause, the right moment to step forward. I grew up beside my mother's sewing table. It sat under a window that faced the alley, where you could hear children shout and a dog bark now and then. The table was scarred and soft from years of use. The old machine hummed like a gentle bee. When Mama pressed the pedal, the sound filled the house in a way that felt like safety. She taught me patience before I knew the word. "Hold the fabric steady," she would say, guiding my hands with her warm fingers. We ironed seams until they lay flat, smooth as quiet water. We saved every scrap, folding them by size, tucking them in a biscuit tin. "You never know which piece will save a day," she'd add with a smile. I loved the smell of warm cotton and starch. I liked the chalk lines that made soft paths on the cloth. I liked the way Mama's hands moved slow and sure, never rushing, never scolding. When I made a crooked seam, she would nod and say, "We unpick to learn." Then she would place the little seam ripper in my palm and wait beside me. Most of my childhood clothes were simple, plain skirts, soft blouses, dresses with pockets that held marbles and a folded note from a friend. I never felt poor in them. I felt held. When I married David, we started in a small apartment with thin walls. The couch was second-hand and dipped in the middle. The dining table wobbled if you leaned on it. We laughed about it and stacked some magazines under one leg. Money was tight, but our days were full of small, good things. I cooked with what we had: rice, beans, vegetables from a friend's garden. David worked long hours and came home with tired eyes and a soft voice. When I worried, he would squeeze my hand and say, "We have enough. We have each other." That sentence became a roof over my head. I have never felt at home in flashy clothes. I do not like fabric that clings and reminds me of every breath. I do not like zippers that argue with my ribs or colors that shout before I speak. I like clothes that give my body room to be, room to soften. I like to reach into deep pockets and feel safe. There were years of ache that left quiet marks in me. I lost a job in an office when things changed and the budgets were cut. I sat in a small room with a kind manager who said gentle words that still felt like stones. I carried a box to my car and held the steering wheel until my fingers hurt. I drove home in silence and let the house receive me. My body changed too in the ways bodies do. Children, hormones, time, what used to fit did not fit. The mirror was kinder when I stood far away. In stores, bright lights made everything look loud. Sometimes I felt unseen, even while standing in the middle of a crowd. I learned to sit with grief the way Mama sat with cloth, not rushing it, not pushing it away. I made tea and watched the steam rise. I cried when I needed to and then folded the tears up like fabric scraps and put them away neatly. I told myself, we can be soft and still be strong. One afternoon, when the house was quiet and the sun was a warm square on the floor, I pulled out my old machine. I pressed the pedal and the hum filled the room, filling a space in me I had not noticed was empty. I cut a simple shape and stitched a dress in a soft gray cotton. I made the pockets deep because I have always had things to carry. When I wore that dress to the grocery store, the cashier looked up and smiled. "That's a pretty dress," she said. I said thank you and felt a small heat in my chest. It seemed silly to feel that much from a few words, but it had been a long time since anything I wore felt like me. My neighbor, Rosa, asked if I could make one for her. "I like the way yours hangs," she said, tugging her shirt with a sigh. "My clothes are always pulling at me." I told her to buy the fabric and I would do the rest. When she put the dress on, she stood taller and then cried a little. "I feel like I can breathe," she whispered. After that, it was another friend, and then another. A cousin at a birthday party touched my sleeve and asked where I bought it. I told the truth. "I made it." She ordered one in navy. I kept the prices gentle. I wrote names and sizes in a notebook and tucked a pencil behind my ear like Mama used to do. Late at night, I began to sketch. I am not an artist, but I drew shapes that made sense in my hands. Clean lines, gentle waist, room in the shoulders, pockets deep enough to hold a phone and a small hope. I wrote small notes around the drawings. Soft, kind on the skin, no rushing. I wrote the words haven and hem at the top of a page and circled them. Haven for the place clothes can give us. Hem for the honest work with our hands. The two words looked right together. They felt like a promise to treat people gently, starting with myself. I did not tell many people. I kept it quiet because the dream felt tender, like a new seam not yet pressed. I told David, of course. He sat beside me at the table and traced the edge of the paper. "Haven and hem," he said, testing the sound. "It's you." I nodded and swallowed because I knew what it cost to say the dream out loud. Family can be kind and sharp all in the same afternoon. My sister-in-law, Carla, loves clothes that turn heads. High heels, gold hoops, shiny fabrics that catch light when she moves. She looks beautiful and she knows it. Her comments come fast and bright like little sparks. They are not always cruel, but sometimes they land in tender places. At a barbecue once, she patted my apron and laughed. "You and your little house dresses," she said. "One day we'll get you into a real outfit." I smiled and said nothing. Inside, I folded that moment and put it away like a scrap. I told myself I would turn it into something useful later. Aunt Leela has a big heart and a bigger voice. She loves to give advice like she's passing out candy. "Wear red," she tells me, tapping my arm. "Red is for women who know they are alive." I nod and thank her. I know she means well. Still, I go home and reach for the soft grays and blues that make my shoulders drop. Nia, my daughter, sees everything. She has the kind of eyes that notice when your breath changes. She will send me a little message from across a room. "You okay?" I love her for that. She likes to help me tie bows on the back of dresses and holds the tape measure for me like it is something holy. Eli is quiet and kind. He will untangle thread while I cook. He oils the machine and listens to the hum with me like it is a lullaby. He does not say many words, but when he does, they land with care. "It sounds happy," he told me once, and I knew he meant the machine and maybe me too. I kept sewing for neighbors and friends. Some nights, the seams were crooked and I had to start again. Some days, I made mistakes and pressed them flat to learn from them. I bought better scissors that made a clean sound and felt like respect. I learned to make the necklines sit easy and the sleeves not bite. Little by little, the idea grew. I thought about making a few pieces and letting the people I love see them. Not for a big show, not with lights or music, just a quiet moment where I could say, "This is what I have been doing." A soft launch, a whisper instead of a shout. The community hall near our street has seen every kind of celebration. First birthdays, graduation parties with sticky floors, Silent auctions where nobody bids and everyone laughs. The rent is fair, and the manager knows me by name. I called and asked for a Saturday evening that would not cost too much. I told the family we should have a little party. Nothing fancy, just tea and cake and time together. We could celebrate being together and the way Aunt Leela was feeling better after her health scare. I offered to handle the hall and the simple setup. No one asked many questions. They were happy someone else was doing the work. In my workshop corner at home, I made sample dresses in quiet colors. Oatmeal, soft navy, a warm gray that looked like a cloud before rain, a muted green that made me think of leaves after summer heat. I stitched pockets into each one and pressed the seams with care. I wrote the sizes on small paper squares and clipped them to the hangers. I found wooden hangers at a thrift store and sanded them smooth. I did not want anything that squeaked or scratched. I bought a simple white curtain and 2 silver clips to hang it with. I thought of Mama as I pinned the hem and pressed it. The curtain would hide the little display until it was time. I went to the print shop with a folded paper where I had drawn my logo. The clerk looked at me kindly and helped me choose a soft brown cardstock. We printed simple tags with Haven and Hem in a neat font and a small line under it. Come home to yourself. I tied each tag with twine and felt the rightness of it in my chest. On our dining table, I laid out the care cards. Cold wash, line dry, be gentle. I added a note at the bottom. You matter more than your size, take your time. It seemed to me that clothes should say something kind if they are going to speak at all. I tucked the cards into a small box and closed the lid. I bought a plain tablecloth and a handful of fresh baby's breath from the market, just a little for quiet beauty. I baked 2 simple cakes and planned a pot of cinnamon tea. When I added the costs, I did it with a pencil and took a breath. David looked at the numbers and nodded. This is within what we planned, he said. We're okay. The children knew the plan. I asked them to keep the secret. Nia grinned and hugged me. This is brave, she whispered. Eli nodded and carried the box of hangers to the car. We felt like a small team, carrying something soft but strong. It felt like we were building a little raft and pushing it onto the water. I wrote a small speech and kept it in my pocket. Just a few lines about my mother and patience and why simple clothes matter to me. I practiced speaking alone in the kitchen, with the clock ticking and the kettle sighing. When I stumbled over a word, I pressed my palm to the counter and tried again. I did not want to make the moment big. I only wanted to make it true. Carla sent photos in the family group chat of glittery dresses and high heels. Let's make it a fancy night, she wrote with many exclamation points. I answered with a smile and said I would wear something simple. She replied with a laughing face and a little sparkle. I put my phone down and breathed in and out until the sting passed. I kept reminding myself why I was doing this, not to prove anything, not to win. I wanted to offer something gentle to the people I loved and to anyone else who might need it. I wanted to stand in my own clothes and say, here, this is me. That is all. In the days before the party, the house looked like a sewing store. Threads on the carpet. Pins gathered in a bowl, a tape measure hanging from a chair back like a vine. I pressed each dress and let them cool on the bed. I wrote names on small envelopes for the tags and stacked them in a neat pile. On the morning of the party, David brewed extra coffee and handed me a mug. 1 stitch at a time, he said, smiling. 1 breath at a time, I answered. We packed the car together. The hangers, the curtain, the tablecloth and flowers, the little box with the tags and the care cards. I stood by the doorway before we left and looked at my mother's machine. The light from the window touched the silver needle. I could almost hear Mama's voice. Keep your seam steady, she would say. Don't rush. I touched the machine with 2 fingers and whispered, I won't. The hall looked plain when we arrived. The way I like things to look before they become what they are meant to be. We set the table. We hung the curtain. I clipped the 2 silver clips and smoothed the fabric with my palm. Behind it, I placed the wooden hangers with the dresses, lined up like quiet friends waiting for their turn to speak. I put on my own dress, the soft one with the pockets that started all of this. I checked myself in the small mirror and tried to see my face the way my children see it. Kind. Tired, maybe, but hopeful. I pressed my hands to the fabric once like a blessing. Then I turned and opened the doors to let my family in. The family group chat started to buzz a few days before the party. Carla sent a picture of a glittery gold dress with a deep neckline and wrote, "This would be perfect for Saturday." She added a string of sparkling emojis that looked like fireworks. I typed back, "I'll wear something simple." She answered with a laughing face and a little crown, as if I had told a joke. Aunt Leela chimed in. "Red is the color of life," she wrote. "Wear red, sweetheart, it will warm your face." My cousin Mara added a photo of her heels and said, "Let's look sharp." David put a single smiling face in the thread and wrote, "Tea and cake is the plan." I gently tried to guide the tone. "It will be low-key," I wrote. "Just family and a few friends, comfort clothes welcome." Carla sent another glitter dress, this time in silver, and said, "Comfort can be fabulous, too." I put the phone down and let the air settle around me. At the grocery store, I walked slowly with my list. I put 2 sacks of flour in the cart and a modest bag of sugar. Butter was more expensive, so I chose margarine and took a deep breath to accept it. The cinnamon was on sale. I smiled and put 2 small jars in the basket. In the baking aisle, I met Rosa leaning on her cart. Her dress was one I had made for her, faded now but still soft and kind. She glanced at the margarine and raised an eyebrow. "Let me bring butter," she said. "Please, it matters." I shook my head and smiled. "I have a plan," I told her, and she patted my arm. At the register, the cashier looked at the cinnamon and cake flour and said, "Baking for a party?" I said yes and told her it was a family gathering. "Have a good time," she said, and she handed me the receipt like a blessing. I tucked it into my wallet and felt steady again. That night, after the house was quiet, I stood in the kitchen with my little speech in my hand. The refrigerator hummed, and the clock made a slow sound that matched my breath. I read the words out loud and heard how stiff they were. I crossed out lines until only the truth remained. I tried a different way. I spoke like I would speak to a friend over tea. "My mother taught me to sew. She taught me to breathe through mistakes." I paused and let that sit in the room. The words felt less heavy and more like water. This was better. The next afternoon, Rosa came for her fitting. I had made a sample in a warm green with gentle sleeves. She stepped into it and I zipped the back. "It feels like a hug," she whispered, smoothing her hands over her hips. The hem was a little long. I knelt with pins and marked the floor kiss. "Turn slowly," I said, and she did, laughing a little. The pockets made her smile. "I could hide my whole life in here," she joked, sliding her hands in. We looked at each other in the mirror and nodded, satisfied in the quiet way women are when something finally fits. The day after, May from across the street stopped by after work. She is calm and neat, with eyes that see beauty in small things. I had a navy sample for her. When she slipped it on, the shoulders were a bit tight. I let out the seam a tiny bit, pressed it, and tried again. This time, it sat easy. May lifted her arms and watched the fabric move. "I can carry my phone and my keys," she said, checking the pocket depth, "and my little note with a grocery list." I smiled and wrote a small note in my book. Pocket depth is good. She hugged me and said, "I can be there Saturday. I can help if you want." We stood by the door and I told her my secret in a low voice. Her eyes warmed and shone at once. "I'll wear the navy," she said. "If you need me to stand up front, I will." My hands shook a little as I thanked her. It felt like laying one more plank on the little raft. The week moved slowly and quickly at the same time. I pressed the dresses and clipped tags to each hanger. I tied twine through tiny holes in small cards like prayers. The scissors left little moons on my fingers where they pressed. I stuck a bandage on and kept going. In the group chat, Carla sent one more picture of a sparkling dress the night before the party. "Last chance to be a star," she wrote with a wink. I replied, "Tomorrow is for tea and hugs. Wear what makes you feel at home." She sent another laughing face and a little string of diamonds. I put the phone face down. David watched me fold napkins at the table. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded and spoke the truth. "I am nervous," I said. "I am also ready." He reached for a napkin and folded with me. "One breath at a time," he said softly. The morning of the party, I woke before the sun. I made coffee and stood at the window. The sky was still and gray, like the soft fabric of my dress. I carried the Haven dress to the bed and laid it out. It looked simple and sure, like a friend who would never ask me to be louder than I am. I put it on slowly, feeling each part of it find my shape. The neckline rested kind on my collarbones. The waist was gentle and forgiving. The pockets were deep and ready. I slid my speech into one pocket and a small handkerchief Mama left me into the other. I packed the car with David and the children. The curtain went in first, rolled in a tube. The wooden hangers, the small box of tags and care cards, the tablecloth and the flowers wrapped in paper, the cakes in their tins taped shut with trust. On the drive, the road was quiet. David's hand rested on my knee. I watched the houses go by and felt like I was floating and sinking at the same time. "I can do this," I said out loud, testing the words like a seam. "Yes," David said softly, "you can." At the hall, the little key turned with a squeak in the door. The room waited for us, bare and patient. We set the table by the back wall and smoothed the cloth. Nia helped me hang the curtain with the 2 silver clips. It hung straight, like a held breath. Behind the curtain, I placed the hangers with care. The dresses faced the room, though no one would see them yet. I checked the tags, Haven and Hem. I ran my finger over the letters. It felt like touching a small prayer I had been saying for years. I set the gift bags near the end of the table and slipped a care card into each one. "Cold wash, line dry, be gentle," the card said, like a little blessing spoken in a clean voice. I put a small sprig of baby's breath on top of each bag. It was a tiny flower, but it made each bag look like it had been seen. The door opened, and Aunt Leela arrived with a cane she did not need but liked to hold. She kissed my cheek and looked me over. "You look sweet," she said, then added with a tap on my sleeve, "Maybe a red scarf next time." I smiled and nodded. "Maybe," I said, and moved on to the tea. Carla came in with a cloud of perfume and heels that clicked. She took one look at me and laughed, just as she had in the doorway in my memory. "So plain," she said, teasing, her eyes sweeping my dress like a scanner. "Did we not say party?" I took a breath and let it out through my nose. "I like to feel like myself," I said gently. 2 cousins came behind her, whispering behind their hands. "She never changes her style," one murmured, and the other replied, "She's comfortable." The word felt like a small gift, even if it was offered by accident. I thanked them for coming and pointed them toward the plates. A teenager I love, our cousin Jonah, pointed at my dress with a grin. "Auntie, is that your uniform?" he asked, like we were sharing a joke. I smiled back. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe it's my favorite kind." He laughed and wandered off toward the cake, happy and light. I walked to the curtain and checked the clips again. My hands were not steady, and I told them to be calm. I peered behind the curtain to make sure the hangers were even and the tags were not twisted. Haven and Hem looked back at me in a row. I felt the flutter of butterflies in my stomach. David came close and stood the way he always does, just near enough for me to feel him. He looked at my face and asked softly, "Are you sure?" I nodded, and my voice came out thin. "I'm scared." He squeezed my hand once. "You can do this," he said, and I nodded again. People kept arriving. The room filled with good smells and small sounds. A cousin looked at me and said, "You look comfortable," in a tone that could have meant many things. An aunt patted my shoulder and said, "We could use a little sparkle on you," which made me smile even while it pinched. I poured tea and offered slices of cake. I asked about people's children and their jobs. I listened to small stories about spilled coffee and flat tires and a new plant that would not grow. I found myself leaning into their words, letting them cover the little sharp parts of the evening. Carla gathered a small group near the door and talked about a designer sale at a downtown store. "If you want to feel like a queen, you go there," she said, eyes bright. Someone asked me what I thought. I smiled and said, "I like soft fabric and deep pockets." Carla laughed again, not cruelly, just carelessly. Nia moved through the room like a quiet wind. She placed napkins where they were missing and filled the sugar bowl without being asked. She came to my side and touched my elbow. "You okay?" she whispered. I nodded and made my mouth smile. "I am ready," I said, and I meant it. Rosa arrived, carrying a small bag with a ribbon. She wore a simple cardigan over a dress I had made last month. She wrapped me in a hug that felt like a blanket. "I brought butter anyway," she whispered, and we laughed. "I am here," she added, and I knew what that meant. May came in with a tin of cookies from a bakery near her office. She gave me a quiet smile and a small wink, like we had a tiny bridge between us. She asked where she could put her coat, and I pointed to a chair by the curtain. "Not that one," I added quickly, then softened my voice. "Ah, sorry, the other chair is better." Eli mixed the lemonade at the back table. He worked with a care that calmed me. He lined up the cups and placed the spoons carefully. "It looks good," I told him. "Thanks, Mom," he said, his eyes gentle. "The room feels good." At one point, a spool of thread rolled out from one of my boxes and across the floor. Jonah picked it up with a grin. "You brought your sewing kit to the party?" he teased. I laughed lightly. "Old habits," I said, and tucked the spool away. My heart beat a little faster. Aunt Leela eyed the curtain. "What's this?" she asked, one eyebrow lifting. I kept my voice calm. "Just a corner I need for later," I said. "Nothing exciting." She frowned playfully. "Secrets," she said, wagging a finger, then moved on to the cake like she could not be mad with cinnamon in the room. I checked the gift bags again to make sure each had a care card. The little sprigs of baby's breath looked like tiny snow resting on the tissue paper. I wrote "thank you" on one card with a pen I love and set it back in the row. I breathed in and out and watched my hands settle. Carla walked behind me and tapped the back of my dress. "You wear the same shape every time," she said, amused. "You should try something daring." I turned to face her and kept my voice soft. "This feels like home to me." She smiled and flipped her hair. "Home is overrated," she said, and drifted away. Near the window, two cousins whispered, then glanced at me. One said, "She always makes things so simple," and the other replied, "Maybe that's all she can do." The words were not meant for me, but they found me anyway. I let them sit in my chest like stones and did not add more to them. A few friends from our street came in, and their faces made my shoulders drop. They hugged me without asking questions. They asked for tea and talked about small things. They glanced at the curtain, but they did not tug at it. They trusted me to speak when I was ready. The kettle whistled, and I lifted it from the burner. The sound was bright and honest. I poured slowly and asked, "Sugar, honey." The simple words steadied me. They were the kind of words that do not shake when you say them out loud. David stayed near the back of the room, a steady anchor. Every now and then our eyes met, and it was like taking a sip of water in a dry place. He did not push me. He did not urge me. He just held the space with me. Music played softly from a small speaker near the window. The songs were gentle and low. People talked over them, and the room had the hum of a happy hive. I walked through it all like a person carrying a lantern, careful and slow. Carla started telling a story about a work event where she felt underdressed. "I learned my lesson," she said, laughing. "Better to be too much than too little." People nodded and chuckled. I smiled and pressed a hand into my pocket. My speech was there, folded like a small bird waiting. Rosa came close and brushed a crumb from my sleeve. "Your hands are shaking," she said quietly. I nodded. "Are your feet steady?" she asked. I thought about it. "Yes," I said. "My feet are steady." She squeezed my arm and drifted away to greet someone. May caught my eye and tilted her head toward the curtain. I nodded and shook my head all at once. "Soon," I mouthed. She smiled and sipped her tea. She is the kind of friend who can hold space without filling it with noise. Nia set a small plate of cake in front of me. "Eat a little," she said. "It will help." I took a small bite and let the cinnamon sit on my tongue. It tasted like winters when we stood by the oven and warmed our hands. It tasted like home. A neighbor asked me where I found the tablecloth. I laughed. "It's mine," I said. "Just a simple cloth." She touched the edge and nodded. "It looks nice in this light," she said. I tucked that away like a small jewel. One guest, a cousin's friend, looked me up and down with curiosity. "Do you ever wear anything bright?" she asked. I smiled gently. "Sometimes my heart is bright," I said. She blinked, then smiled back. "Fair," she said. I felt a tug inside me like a thread being pulled through fabric. It was not time yet, but time was coming. I checked the curtain again. I touched the clips and smoothed the hem like it was a living thing. I whispered, "Soon," and let my hands fall to my sides. Aunt Leela came over with her cane and looked at me with soft eyes. "You look like yourself," she said, and then she added, "I am glad to be here." I nodded, feeling a little ache rise in my throat. "I am glad you are here too," I said. We stood together for a moment without speaking. In the group chat, a little ping sounded from my pocket. I did not look at it. I did not need more shiny dresses on a small screen while I stood in my own. I turned the phone face down inside my pocket and felt the paper of my speech, steady and true. A cousin asked about the curtain again. "What's behind it?" she asked with a smile. I let the pause sit between us. "You'll see," I said softly. "I promise." She grinned and walked away, arms full of plates. Someone joked that the curtain looked like a magic show was about to begin. "Is a rabbit going to jump out?" he asked. "I hope not," I said, and we laughed, soft and quick. The laughter lifted the room a little and eased the knot in my chest. Carla tried to peek around the side, and I stepped smoothly into her line. I did not touch her, just stood with my hands folded. She lifted her palms and smiled. "Fine," she said, playful. "Keep your secrets." I smiled back and said nothing. I checked the time. I watched the light change on the floorboards. I watched the plates empty and the cups fill and empty again. People settled into the kind of ease that makes chatter swell. The room felt ready in a way that is hard to explain. David came to my side and leaned down a little. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low and warm. I looked at the curtain. I looked at my hands. I looked at the faces of my family and my friends. I nodded once, slowly. Then I shook my head just a little. "Not yet," I whispered. "Almost." He touched my elbow and stepped back. He was not going to push me to the edge of my own moment. He would only stand watch. The butterflies in my stomach woke and fluttered. I let them move. I did not ask them to be quiet. I let them make a small circle inside me, because sometimes the shake is part of the truth. I reached into my pocket and felt the fold of my paper again. I poured one more round of tea. I asked one more aunt about her cat. I took one more slow walk along the table, straightening a pile of napkins that did not need straightening. I looked at the curtain and breathed. I kept the secret for a few more minutes, holding it like a small bird that was ready to fly. We ate together the way families do, with plates held in one hand and forks in the other. People stood in small circles and told stories about traffic and bosses and the neighbor's dog who kept escaping. The cinnamon cake went fast, and the teapot never had a rest. I moved through the room, filling cups, smiling, nodding. I was there, but the laughter moved around me like wind around a tree. Now and then I heard a whisper that was not meant for my ears. "I told you she would wear something plain. She never changes. Maybe she does not know how to dress for a party." The words were soft, but they had edges. I kept my eyes gentle and my mouth steady. I slipped into the kitchen to catch my breath. The sink was full of warm, soapy water, and the steam rose up like a fog. I held the edge of the counter and let the heat touch my face. My eyes burned and I blinked up at the ceiling until the tears changed their mind. I listened to the sounds in the hall. A fork clinked against a plate. A chair moved, legs scraping the floor. Someone laughed at the punchline of a joke. It all sounded far away and close at the same time. I put both palms flat on the counter and felt the small tremble in my fingers. Nia came into the kitchen without a word. She stood beside me and did not rush me. She looked at my face the way she always does, as if she can read the small print on my heart. She slid her hand into mine and squeezed once. "Mom, you're ready," she said softly. I turned my face toward her and saw my own eyes in hers. I saw a brave kind of love there, the kind that does not need many words. I nodded and let a breath fall out of me like a stone into water. I whispered. "I am ready." We walked back into the hall together. David saw me and straightened a little. He set down his cup and met me near the curtain, his hand warm at my elbow. "Do you want help?" he asked, voice low and calm. "Just stand with me," I said. I looked at the room. I looked at the faces I have known for years. I set my shoulders in a quiet way and tapped my glass with a spoon. The sound was small, but it rang out across the tables. A few people kept talking, and then the sound traveled a little farther and the room softened. "Can I have 5 minutes?" I asked, my voice shaking a little but still coming out steady. "Just 5 minutes and then we can eat more cake." A few people smiled and turned to face me. Others glanced at Carla and then back to me. David moved to the wall and lowered the lights one notch. The room fell into a warmer shade. It felt less like a party and more like a living room. People grew quiet in the way people do when something important is about to be said, even if they do not know it yet. I took a breath and held the paper in my pocket, though I did not take it out. "I want to tell you a small story," I said. "When I was little, my mother taught me to sew. She kept her machine by a window, and the light came in like a kind hand. She taught me patience before I knew what it was," I went on. "When I made a crooked seam, she would say, 'We unpick to learn.' She would place a small seam ripper in my hand and stand beside me while I pulled out each tiny stitch. We did not rush. We pressed the seam and tried again." I looked at the faces in front of me and found the ones that held me up. Rosa, May, my children, David. Then I looked at Carla and I let my eyes stay soft. "My mother showed me that clothes can help us breathe," I said. "Some clothes ask you to be loud. Some clothes let you be quiet. I have always needed the quiet kind." I stepped closer to the curtain. The white fabric hung in a simple line. The 2 silver clips held it the way hands hold a book. I kept my voice calm. "I have been working on something small. It is not big or fancy. It is just honest." I slipped my fingers under the curtain's edge and felt the smooth weave against my skin. Time seemed to slow just a little, the way it does before a wave touches your ankle. I took one more breath. Then I pulled the curtain back with a gentle sweep. Behind it was a simple display. 3 dresses hung on wooden hangers, their shapes clean and kind. The colors were soft, a gray like a quiet morning, a navy like the hour before night, a muted green like leaves that have learned the sun. On a small table beneath them, I had placed fabric swatches folded into squares and a neat stack of small cards with the words Haven and Hem printed in brown ink. There was a soft sound in the room, a collective inhale. Someone murmured, "Oh." Another person whispered, "What is this?" The wooden hangers did not squeak. The dresses hung like a promise kept. Carla went very quiet. She did not try to joke. She did not reach for the curtain. She stood still, her eyes moving from the dresses to my face and back again. Her mouth softened from a line into a round shape of surprise. I did not make it grand. I did not raise my voice. I said it like I was telling someone the time. "This dress I'm wearing is my first design," I said. "Tonight is my brand's launch." The words left my mouth and settled over the room like a light blanket. People shifted in their chairs. Someone put down a cup very carefully. Aunt Leela's eyes filled and she pressed a tissue to her mouth. I stepped to the small table and picked up one of the cards. "It's called Haven and Hem," I said. "Haven because I believe clothes can be a small home for a tired heart. Hem because the work is in the hands, slow and honest." I placed the card back down and smoothed it with my fingertips. Rosa took one step forward. "I'll model," she said, her voice steady and warm. May stepped up too. "Me as well," she offered, already slipping her cardigan off her shoulders. The room watched them with interest, the way people watch a door open to a room they did not know they wanted to see. I lifted the navy dress from its hanger and handed it to May. She held it with respect, the way you hold something you already love. "The shoulders were adjusted for comfort," I said quietly. "There is room to move without the fabric biting back." May nodded and stepped behind a small screen I had set to one side. Rosa took the muted green. "This one has a gentle waist," I explained. "No tight bands, just a soft line that meets you where you are." She smiled. "That sounds like a person," she said, and we both knew she was right. While they changed, I stood beside the gray dress and touched the seam that ran along the side. "I learned to press my seams flat," I said to the room, more to fill the air than anything else. "It makes the inside as kind as the outside. I think that matters." May stepped back into the room, the navy dress resting on her shoulders as if it had always been meant for her. She slipped her hands into the pockets and smiled, small and true. The dress did not cling. It did not shout. It held her with respect. Rosa followed, the green moving softly as she walked. She turned slowly and the hem brushed her knees like a gentle hello. "Look," she said, sliding her hands into the pockets. "Deep pockets." People smiled without meaning to. There is always a small joy when pockets happen where you need them. I spoke in a voice that could be heard without being loud. The pockets are meant to hold what matters. Your phone, yes, your keys, but also your anxious little notes, your hands when you need to feel safe. They are sewn deep and lined so that nothing pokes you. I stepped closer to May and touched the shoulder seam with one finger. "Here," I said, not quite touching her, just pointing. "I made this seam smooth so it will not scratch your skin. The lining is soft. The thread is strong, but it will not fight you." People came closer, but not too close. They leaned forward a little on their toes. They looked with their eyes and with their hands, the way you look when you might be allowed to touch but are not sure. I nodded to the fabric swatches on the table. "You can feel those," I said, and a few hands reached out. David moved quietly, straightening a hanger, picking up a card that had fallen. He did not speak, but his presence made the space feel safe. Nia stood near me, watchful and proud. Eli hovered at the back, but his smile was bright, like a small lantern. I held up a simple belt. "Some people like to tie it," I said. "You can, or you can let the dress hang free. I like both. It should be yours." May tied the belt in a loose bow and nodded. "It listens," she said, half laughing. "It listens to the body." A few people chuckled softly. Someone whispered, "Beautiful." Another said, "Peaceful." The words made me feel like I had a small fire inside that did not burn me, only warmed me. I glanced at Carla. She was still. She did not look away. Her eyes were shiny in a way I could not read. Her hands were folded at her waist. She had no witty words yet, and her silence felt like a kind of attention I had never had from her. Aunt Leela took a step closer and touched the green hem with 2 fingers, light as a kiss. "It is so smooth," she said, almost to herself. "It feels like, what is the word?" She looked at me. "Kind," I offered. She nodded. "Yes, it feels kind." I turned back to the room. "I have been sewing at my kitchen table," I said. "At night, in the morning, between chores and life." I did not plan to make a big show. I only wanted to offer something gentle to the people I love, and to anyone else who might need it. Rosa turned so the room could see the back. "There's a hidden zipper," I explained, "but it's soft. It does not argue, and if you want buttons instead, I can do that. The idea is that your clothes should not make you tired." May slid her hands along the side and then clapped softly to herself. "It does not hold my belly," she said in a calm voice. "It lets me be." Something shifted in the room with those words. A few women nodded like they were remembering something they had been trying to forget. I lifted the gray dress from its hanger and held it up. "This was my first," I said. "The one I made when I felt invisible. I put it on and I could breathe again. Not because it made me beautiful to the world, but because it made me honest to myself." A soft gasp came from the left side of the room. A cousin I do not see often had a hand at her throat. "I think I need that," she said, half laughing, half crying. "I think I am tired of holding my breath." I stepped back so people could look. I did not fill the silence. I let it move around the room and settle where it wanted to sit. It was not an awkward silence. It was a listening silence. Carla took one step forward. "You made these?" she asked, very quietly, as if the words might break if she spoke too loud. "With your hands," I nodded. "With my hands," I said, "with my mother's voice in my ear." She looked at the tag on the gray dress and read it. "Haven and Hem," she said, tasting the words. She traced the little line under the name with her finger. Her hand trembled just once. I turned and picked up a care card. "There are cards in the gift bags," I said to the room. "They tell you how to wash the dress, how to dry it, but also they say this: you matter more than your size, take your time." I could hear my own voice steady. I felt taller in my own skin. Rosa laughed softly and swayed from side to side. "It moves," she said, delight in her tone. It does not fight me. May joined her with a small turn, a quiet dance that made the hem of the navy dress float just a little. The room watched in a hush that felt like respect. There is a hush in the room, I said inside myself. The air shifts. I could feel it. The small jokes had gone silent. The quick laughter had slowed. People were thinking not about fashion, but about breath. I spoke again, the words simple and plain. I know not everyone loves simple dresses, I said. That is okay. This is for the ones who need them, for the ones who want to be soft and still be strong, for the ones who want deep pockets and gentle seams. A hand went up in the back and I smiled. May I try one? A neighbor asked. Of course, I said. I lifted the gray dress and held it out. Would you like the belt? She shook her head. Not today, she said. She stepped behind the screen and the room waited with a calm curiosity. When she stepped out, she looked at herself in the window's reflection. Her shoulders lowered. She let out a breath she had been holding and did not know why. It feels like me, she said softly. A cousin's teenage daughter whispered, I would wear that, like she was confessing something sweet. Her mother looked surprised and then thoughtful. It would be comfortable for school, the girl added. I filed that away in a quiet place in my mind. A friend touched a swatch and rubbed it between her fingers. It is not scratchy, she said, relief in her voice. I always get rashes from seams. I nodded. The inside matters, I said. We line where the body is tender. We choose thread that does not bite. Someone else asked, do you make different lengths? I smiled. I can, I said. Below the knee to the ankle, just above, clothes should meet you where you live. The room seemed to exhale again. Carla finally spoke. I did not know, she said, and she looked at me like she was seeing me through a window that had just been cleaned. I did not know this is what you were doing. Her voice was not sharp. It was something else, something open. It is okay, I said gently. I kept it quiet. It was a tender thing. I wanted to be sure before I brought it into the light. She nodded, and her eyes fell to the dresses again, as if they were telling her the rest of the story I had not spoken. I pointed to the little sign I had written by hand and set on the table. If you want to place an order, I said, I have a small notebook. No pressure, no rush. I am here to show you something I love. That is all. May reached for a glass of water and took a sip, then handed the glass to me. I took a small drink and let the coolness sit on my tongue. Thank you, I whispered to her. Always, she whispered back. I saw Aunt Leela move closer to the screen. I want to try that one, she said, pointing at the muted green. I know, I always say wear red. She chuckled at herself and the room chuckled with her. But today, I want to feel calm. I helped her into the dress and zipped it carefully. When she stepped out, the room made a soft sound again. The dress held her with dignity. She looked at herself in the dark window and patted her hair. Hello, me, she said kindly. It was a small sentence, but it filled the room. I walked back to the little table and picked up the twine-tied tags just to give my hands something to do. They did not shake now. My breath was even. The curtain we had pulled back hung like a flag for quiet hearts. David took my hand and squeezed it once, careful not to make a scene. I squeezed back and felt the truth of the moment through the warm bridge of our fingers. This was real. This was mine. This was ours. The teenagers came forward, braver now. One said, "Can I have one with longer sleeves?" I nodded. "Yes," I said. Another asked, "Can it be black?" I smiled. "Yes." They grinned, and it felt like the future was leaning in to listen. A cousin, the one who had whispered earlier about me always being simple, stepped closer and touched the hem of the gray dress. "You did not make a simple thing," she said, her voice surprised at itself. "You made a strong thing that looks simple." I met her eyes. "Thank you," I said. Carla reached into a gift bag and pulled out a care card. She read the line at the bottom and pressed her lips together. "You matter more than your size," she read under her breath. She held the card like it was heavier than paper. I let her have that moment without stepping in. I felt the room settle into a new shape. People were softer with each other. They spoke in easier tones. The dresses did not change the world, but they had opened a door in this small hall, and we were all standing on the threshold. I took one step forward, closer to the people I love. "Thank you for listening," I said. "Thank you for letting me show you my heart with sleeves." A small ripple of laughter moved through the room and settled again. We did not turn on bright lights. We did not play loud music. We stood together in a warm, quiet, and touched cloth that had been held and pressed and stitched with care. We spoke softly, asked simple questions, and gave simple answers. Carla lifted her eyes to me again and tried to smile. It was a small smile, careful and honest. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "I am thinking," she said. "Take your time," I replied. I looked at the little sign with Haven and Hem on it and felt a swell of something like gratitude and courage mixed together. This was not just about dresses. This was about my mother's hands guiding mine, about patience when you want a rush, about making something gentle in a world that often wants to be loud. Rosa linked her arm through mine and leaned her head on my shoulder for a second. "Look at you," she whispered. "Look at you doing the thing." I laughed under my breath. "I am standing," I said, "and it is enough." May adjusted the belt on her dress and grinned. "You should open the window a crack," she said. "Let the night air in." Eli did it for us, and a cool breeze slipped through the room, taking the scent of cinnamon and warm cloth and weaving them together. I thought of Mama then very clearly. I saw her standing by the window, her hands on the fabric, her voice low and kind. "We unpicked to learn," she had said. I had unpicked fear. I had unpicked shame. I had pressed the seam and tried again. People moved, came closer, asked to touch this seam and that. They asked about lengths, about colors, about washing. I answered the questions as they came, simple and direct. No hurry, no rush. The moment did not want speed. Someone asked about price, and I told them gently. A few nodded. A few looked relieved. "I want this to be reachable," I said. "I want it to feel like a good friend, not a stranger." It sounded simple, but it was the truth. David wrote names down in the small notebook when hands were full. Nia fetched more cups and found more chairs. Eli collected used plates and stacked them quietly near the sink. We were a team without needing to say we were. I caught my own reflection in the window next to Aunt Leela's. I did not look like a model or a boss. I looked like a woman in a soft dress, standing up in her own small light. It was more than enough. The room was not silent, but it had a new kind of quiet. People were not mocking. They were listening. Even when they talked, they did it with their inside voices, like we were all sitting in a gentle church made of cotton and care. Carla stepped near the green dress and lifted the fabric edge. "It really is soft," she said to no one, or maybe to herself. Her fingers smoothed the weave. She let the edge go and then held it again, as if she did not want to stop touching it. She glanced at me and looked away, then looked back. I did not push toward her, and I did not turn away. I stayed where I was, rooted and ready if she wanted to come closer. Today was not for anything loud. Today was for the quiet reveal, the gentle shift, the moment that belonged to breath more than to words. I turned one dress slightly on the hanger and made a small adjustment to the tag. Haven and Hem shone up at me in simple brown ink, and for a moment I felt the deep, calm joy of something that feels exactly right in your hands. I closed my eyes, just for a second, and let that joy settle into my bones. When I opened them, the room was still with me. People were waiting for me to speak again, but not with impatience. They were waiting like they wait for the next part of a song they already love. I smiled and shook my head a little. "Go on," I said. "Touch, ask, try." The crowd loosened into gentle movement once more. Some went for more cake. Some stayed near the dresses. Some stood in the doorway to feel the night air. No one laughed at me now. If anyone laughed, it was the soft kind, the kind that spills out when something feels right. It was not a grand moment, but it was a true one. The curtain was open. The dresses were seen. The name was said out loud. The story had been told. And in that small hall with cinnamon in the air and the sound of cups touching saucers, the air had shifted. We were all breathing a little easier. The first sound was a small clap from the corner. It sounded shy, like it was asking permission. Then another pair of hands joined, and then a few more. The applause grew until it filled the room in a soft, real way. It did not roar. It felt like warm rain. People began to step forward in twos and threes. They moved closer to the dresses as if they were coming near a sleeping baby. They reached out and touched the fabric swatches with gentle fingers. Some held the edge of a hem and rubbed it like you test a comforter. It made the room feel calm and curious. David came to my side and put his arms around me for a moment. He did not squeeze hard. He did not draw attention. He held me as if we were standing in our kitchen, quiet and safe. "I'm proud of you," he whispered, and I felt those words settle inside me like a steady weight in a drifting boat. Eli stood a little ways off with his hands in his pockets. He had a smile that started in his eyes and spread to his mouth. He nodded once like we were sharing a secret. "It sounds happy in here," he said softly when I passed near him. I nodded back. "It does," I answered. Nia's eyes were bright with tears she did not try to hide. She slipped her hand into mine and leaned her shoulder against me. "You did it," she murmured. I gave her fingers a small squeeze. "We did it," I said, "all of us." Questions floated toward me on kind voices. "What fabric is this? Can I wash it at home? Do you make this in a longer length?" I answered each one in simple words. "It's cotton with a soft finish. Cold wash, line dry. Yes, I can make it longer. Yes, I can make it shorter. We will make it yours." A woman I knew from the school office touched the inside seam. "It doesn't scratch," she said, amazed. "I always feel itchy by the end of the day." I nodded. "The inside matters," I told her. "I work on the inside as much as the outside. Clothes touch our skin. They should be kind." Rosa and May kept the dresses on and moved through the room. Rosa showed a woman how the waist did not pinch. May stood with a teenager and tucked and untucked the soft belt to show the choices. They did not pose like models. They stood like people who felt at home in what they wore. It made others relax. Someone started clapping again, not loud, just steady and sure. The sound spread, warm and real. It felt like everyone understood we were not clapping for a show. We were clapping for a small courage. My throat tightened, but my breathing stayed even. I pulled out my small notebook from my pocket. My hands trembled a little and I laughed under my breath at the flutter. "I can take names," I said. "No rush, no pressure. If you want a dress, we will write it down and make a plan." A few women stepped forward, shy and brave at once. The school office friend gave me her name and number. She told me the color she loved and the length that would make her feel safe at her desk. I wrote it carefully, letter by letter. My hand shook, but my writing stayed neat. "Thank you," she said. "No," I whispered. "Thank you." A young mother asked for room to nurse with ease. "No buttons that wake a baby," she said with a tired smile. "We can do a soft wrap inside," I suggested. "Hidden and gentle." She nodded and wiped at her eye with a knuckle. "That would be wonderful." A neighbor who often walks her dog in the early morning leaned in. "I want one for walking," she said. "Something I can layer over leggings when it's chilly." I pointed to the muted green. "This one would be perfect," I said. "We will add a little weight to the hem so the wind is kind to you." By the display, Aunt Leela stood with her cane hooked over her arm. She touched the navy with the back of her hand, like you test soup for heat. "I judged too soon," she said, as if admitting a small sin in a friendly church. "I always think red is the answer, but this blue is peaceful." "Do you want to try a different one?" I asked. "We can see how the gray feels." She lifted her chin. "Yes," she said. "Let us be brave and calm." I helped her out of the green and into the gray. It lay on her shoulders as if it had been there all along. She looked at herself in the dark window and beamed. "Hello, me," she said again, and it sounded even sweeter. I stood beside her and watched her look at herself without hurry. "It suits you," I said. "It lets your face speak." She nodded and patted the pocket. "And it lets my hands rest," she added. "I like a pocket for my secrets." I kept the gift bags in a neat row on the table and started handing them out as people came close. "There is a care card inside," I said each time. "Cold wash, line dry, be gentle, and there is a small note from me." People looked surprised and pleased to receive a gift without a price. They opened the bags and found the sprig of baby's breath and the card. Some smiled at the words at the bottom. "You matter more than your size," a woman read aloud. "Take your time." One cousin held the card to her chest and sighed. "I needed to hear that today," she said. not just about clothes. I nodded and did not try to say anything wise. Sometimes simple words are enough. Another cousin came and stood close to the dresses with her arms crossed. "It's not my style," she said, but her voice had no bite. "I like sharp lines and bold colors." I smiled at her. "That's okay," I said. "These are for people who want quiet. We can still have tea together." She laughed and uncrossed her arms. "We can," she agreed. An aunt ran her fingers along the seam and asked, "How long does it take?" I thought for a moment. 2 weeks, I answered. "Sometimes 3 if I need to wait for the right fabric. I would rather go slow than send you something that does not feel right." She nodded as if I had passed a small test. A friend from church wrote her name in my notebook with my pen. "Make me whatever you think I need," she said, then laughed at herself. "I trust you." I wrote her measurements beside her name with care. "We will decide together," I told her. "It will be a conversation." All through this, David moved the way he always moves through a task, quiet, steady, sure. He refilled cups. He found chairs for tired legs. He held the corner of a dress while I pinned a little note to it. He never tried to stand in my light. He helped me make room for it. Eli returned a stack of clean plates to the table and stood with me while I wrote orders. "Want me to write for you?" he asked. "Your hands are shaking." I smiled. "Let me write this," I said. "I want to feel it." He nodded and stayed close. Nia hugged Rosa and May like they were sisters. "Thank you for helping," she said to each of them. "You looked beautiful." Rosa waved a hand. "We felt beautiful," she said. "That is different." May touched the hem and smiled. "It is," she agreed. "It is better." As the room breathed, I slipped into the kitchen to put the kettle on again. I needed a small break from all the eyes, even kind ones. The kitchen light was softer. The counter was warm where the kettle had sat earlier. The sink held 2 plates and a spoon. It looked like a normal night, and I needed that. I stood there with my hands on the counter and closed my eyes for one slow breath. I heard footsteps behind me on the tile. I opened my eyes and turned. Carla stood in the doorway, her hand on the frame like she needed something to hold. Her eyes were shiny, and not from laughter. For a moment, we just looked at each other. The sounds of the hall were faint, like a radio in another room. Carla took a step into the kitchen and then another. "Can I talk to you?" she asked, her voice small in a way I had not heard before. "Of course," I said. She came close to the counter and stared at the sink. "I want to say I am sorry," she said. "For laughing, for the jokes, for acting like I knew everything and you knew nothing." Her voice wavered and she swallowed. "I did not know what you were carrying. I did not even ask." I did not rush to speak. I let her words sit down between us. I leaned back against the counter and kept my face soft. "Thank you for saying that," I said gently. "It means a lot." Carla looked at her reflection in the dull shine of the kettle and made a face. "I get scared," she said, the words tumbling out. "I get scared of being invisible. I am not the youngest in my office anymore. The clothes that used to make heads turn do not always work now. Sometimes I feel like I am shouting to be seen." She wiped a hand under one eye and laughed at herself in a small, broken way. "I do not like quiet," she said. "Quiet feels like being alone, so I make noise, I make sparkles, I talk loud, I tell people what to wear. I fill the space because I am afraid no one will ask me to sit." I nodded and waited. She kept going, the way a too-tight lid finally comes loose. "I tell you to be glamorous because I want you to be safe," she said, surprising me. "I think if you shine, no one can hurt you, but I see now that your quiet is not fear. It is choice. It is strength I do not have yet." Her words settled into me like pieces finding their place in a puzzle. I let mine rise without hurry. "I have a different fear," I said softly. "I am afraid of being dismissed. I have been told many times I am too plain, too quiet, not enough. I worry that if I do not sparkle, people will walk past me without seeing I am here." I looked at her and we held each other's eyes. "I chose simple because it lets me breathe," I continued. "It is not a protest. It is a home. But when you laugh, it feels like you are knocking on the door of my house and calling it ugly. It hurts." Carla winced and put a hand over her mouth. "I am sorry," she said again, and this time the words were thick. "I did not want to hurt you. I wanted to save you in the only way I knew, but I can see now that I was pushing you away from yourself. I let out a breath I had not noticed I was holding. We unpick to learn, I said, and she looked at me with a question in her eyes. My mother used to say that, I explained. We take out the stitches that do not sit right. We try again. We can do that too. Carla put her hand on the counter near mine, not touching but close. Will you let me try again? She asked. I nodded. Yes, I said. We can try again. We can both be different and still be kind. She laughed a little, true and small. Do you think there is a dress in your mind for someone like me? She asked, and her voice held hope. Something that feels like me but is not shouting, something that lets me be seen without a spotlight. I smiled. I think there is, I said. Maybe a deep navy with a soft sheen, a quiet V-neck, sleeves that move, a waist that listens. She closed her eyes for a second and then opened them, shining. Could you make that for me? She asked. I would like to try being quiet for once and see what happens. I nodded. I would be honored, I said. We stood in the small kitchen and smiled at each other like two women on the same side of a river, finally building a bridge. We walked back into the hall together. It did not feel like a parade. It felt like walking out of a small room with the window open. The air was cooler. The lights were still low and kind. People were still talking near the dresses, touching fabric, smiling. Carla smoothed the edge of the gray dress with her fingers. She made these, she said, almost to herself, almost to the room. With her hands. It was not a grand speech. It was enough. More women came to the little table and gave me their names. Rosa draped a measuring tape around my neck, and we measured shoulders and waists with gentle hands. We wrote heights and notes and favorite colors. My notebook began to fill in a way that made me both excited and careful. David leaned in and whispered, "We will need to make a schedule." I smiled and nodded. "We will," I said. "We will go slow and steady." He tapped the notebook with one finger and grinned. "One stitch at a time," he said. "One breath at a time," I echoed. A woman asked, "Do you make sizes for everyone?" I looked into her eyes and gave the answer my heart had already written. "Yes," I said. "All sizes, all ages, all bodies, you are welcome here." She blinked a few times and wrote her name down with a steady hand. A cousin's friend who had been quiet all evening stepped forward at last. "I am between sizes," she said. "I always feel like I have to squeeze into one or drown in the other." I smiled at her gently. "You do not have to do either here," I said. "We will make the size that is you." I gave out more gift bags. I watched people read the care cards and tuck them into their purses like small letters from a friend. Some people hugged me, some squeezed my hand. Some simply nodded and smiled. Every reaction was welcome. I did not need them all to be the same. A man from the neighborhood, who often fixes bicycles in his garage, came over and held a fabric swatch like it might tell him a story. "This is good work," he said, and his voice carried the weight of someone who works with his hands. "You took your time." I bowed my head a little. "Thank you," I said. "It matters to me." Nia brought a box of tissues and set it near the table with a smile. "Insurance," she joked, and then wiped her own eyes. "I keep crying and I do not know why." I touched her cheek with the back of my fingers. "Because you have a soft heart," I said. "It is a gift." Eli found a lost tag under a chair and handed it to me like he was returning a small bird to its nest. "Don't lose your name," he said, half teasing, half serious. I slipped the tag into my pocket and patted it. "I won't," I said. "Not tonight." Carla stood near the curtain and watched the room. She did not need to shine here to feel seen. I watched her take a breath and let it out. I watched her soften in a way that made me think of a tight knot loosening. She caught my eye and gave a small nod, like a promise. Aunt Leela sat down in a chair and crossed her ankles. "I judged too soon," she said again, this time to David, who stood beside her. "She knows what she is doing." David chuckled. "She always has," he said. "Sometimes we just need to be quiet long enough to see it." I took the muted green dress from Rosa when she was done and hung it back on the wooden hanger. I straightened the tag, smoothed the hem, and pressed the fabric with my palm. It felt less like a dress and more like a letter I had written in a language I finally understood. More orders came, not many, not too few, enough to feel real, enough to feel like a beginning. A woman asked if she could pay a deposit right now, and I shook my head. No need, I said. I will call you with the plan. We will keep it simple. She looked relieved and grateful. I kept my heart open to every face. A few people said they would think about it. Maybe later, they said, and I smiled and said, of course, take your time. One woman said, I wish the colors were brighter, and I nodded. I understand, I said. Maybe one day I will make a bright line. Today is for quiet. A teenager came back with her mother and whispered, I still want black with long sleeves. I wrote it down. We will make it yours, I said. She smiled in a way that told me a small fear had moved out of her body. The room began to slow as people settled into their last cups of tea. The cinnamon cake was half a memory. The music from the small speaker drifted in and out. The dresses hung on their wooden hangers like calm companions. I stood near them with my notebook open and my pen warm in my hand. David came to me again and wrapped me in a hug. He rested his chin on my head for a moment. You did it, he said. His voice had a quiet joy. I held him and let the words wash over me. We did it, I answered. I felt like a tree with roots deep in the ground. Eli slipped an arm around my shoulders, a little awkward but very real. I'm proud of you, Mom, he said. You made a sound without being loud. I laughed softly. That is my favorite kind of sound, I said. Thank you. Nia wiped her eyes and laughed at herself. I have no makeup left, she said. I keep crying every time someone tries a dress. I kissed her forehead. We will make waterproof pockets for you, I teased. She giggled and nodded. Please. As people began to leave, I stood by the door with the gift bags. I pressed one into each set of hands. Thank you for coming, I said to every person, no matter what they thought. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being kind. It felt right to say thank you out loud, again and again. Carla hugged me before she left the hall. It was not a quick air kiss kind of hug. It was warm and stayed. She whispered near my ear, I will call you tomorrow. We can talk about the Navy. I nodded. I will be here, I said. We let go and looked at each other, and then we smiled, simple and true. A cousin who had teased earlier squeezed my hand. You surprised me, she said. In a good way. I smiled. Thank you, I said. I surprised myself a little too. We laughed lightly and let the moment stand. One friend left with her arm around her own waist like she was hugging herself. I ordered a dress, she said, almost to the hallway, and I think I ordered a bit of peace. I watched her go and felt tears press at my eyes again. I let them come this time. They felt clean. When the room was down to just a few, Aunt Leela stood and handed me her cane. Hold this, she said. I want to hug you with 2 arms. I took the cane and set it against the wall. She wrapped me up and patted my back. You made a quiet party into a soft miracle, she whispered. Do not forget this night. I promised her I would not. I helped her with her coat and tucked a care card into her bag even though she already had one. For your friend, I said. Share it if she needs it. She nodded and squeezed my fingers. I have 2 friends who need it, she said. I can share. Rosa and May stayed to help me stack chairs. We moved slow and did not talk much, the way you move and stay in a sweet mood. Now and then we looked at each other and smiled. We did a good thing, May said at last. We did a true thing, I answered. We folded the tablecloth and placed it in a box. We took down the curtain from the 2 silver clips. I folded it in thirds and then in thirds again, pressing it smooth with my hand. The curtain felt like a page we had turned. It would still be there, waiting for the next time. I stood in front of the dresses and said goodnight to them in my mind. It felt silly and sweet. I touched each tag with my finger. Haven and hem, haven and hem, haven and hem. The words felt stronger now that other eyes had seen them. I tucked the notebook into my bag and patted it like a small animal that needed to be kept close. The names inside were a promise. They were also a trust. I felt the weight of that and welcomed it. It was not heavy. It was right. At the doorway, I looked back at the room. The floor was a little sticky where tea had spilled. A chair sat a little crooked. The music had ended. The air still held the faint smell of cinnamon and hope. It looked like any hall after a small party. It felt like the beginning of a new season. I breathed in and out, slow and simple. I let the night settle into me. I told my heart to stay open, even to the people who did not understand yet. I told it to welcome the slow ones, the unsure ones, the ones who need more time. We had time. As we turned off the lights, I tucked one last gift bag into my purse. I thought of someone who could use it later. Maybe the cashier at the store. Maybe the woman on the bus who always looks tired. I like to have kindness ready. We stepped into the cooler air of the parking lot. David carried the box with the hangers. Eli held the folded curtain. Nia had the flowers. I had the notebook and the soft weight of what we had done. We did not speak for a moment. We did not need to. Behind us, the hall was quiet and dark. Inside me, the room was still warm and full of a gentle noise. I knew I would keep that sound. I knew I would need it when the next hard day came. I would open it like a care card and read it again. We loaded the car and closed the trunk with a soft thud. Carla's words in the kitchen came back to me. I am afraid of being overlooked. Mine came back too. I am afraid of being dismissed. I held both truths the way you hold two pieces of fabric before you sew them together. I thought of my mother's voice. We unpicked to learn. As we drove away, I kept my eyes on the small light of the hall's door until it turned a corner and was gone. My notebook sat in my lap. My hand rested on it like you hold a sleeping child on a bus. The names inside felt alive. I whispered thank you into the dark car, to the night, to the people who came, to the gentle work that waited. The resolution did not feel like a finish. It felt like a breath you take after crying, the kind that clears your head. It felt like a hand finding yours under the table and giving it a squeeze. It felt like the soft click of a light turning on in a small room. I held it close and let it be enough for now. We did not hurry when we locked the hall. David and I carried the box of empty hangers between us, one hand each on the rim like we were holding something fragile. The night was cool and kind. Our steps made a soft sound on the sidewalk. I felt light and steady at the same time. We had parked a block from our house, so we walked the last stretch under the street lamps. The folded curtain lay over David's arm like a quiet flag. I held the little box of tags against my chest and kept one sprig of baby's breath in my pocket. The hangers clicked softly, empty now. My hope felt full enough to balance them. At home, the children drifted to their rooms. David set the box on the dining table and put the kettle on. We did not need tea, but the sound was gentle. He kissed my forehead and told me to sit at my sewing table. He stayed close and gave me space. My sewing table waited under the window. I ran a finger along the machine, cool and steady. I pressed both palms on the wood and let the quiet cover me. I could almost hear the hum in my mother's voice. "Thank you, Mama," I whispered, hearing her reply in my heart. We unpicked to learn. Tonight taught me something soft and firm. Sometimes people laugh at what they fear. Sometimes simplicity looks like not trying, especially to eyes that are tired or afraid. But it takes courage to be plain on purpose. It takes a steady heart to choose quiet when the room is lined with bells. I thought about pockets and seams and how they are a way to live. Keep space for what you need to carry. Line the places that rub. Make room to move. When a stitch pulls, take it out with care, press it flat, and try again. I saw Carla again in my mind, holding the door frame like a tired dancer. Her apology was small and true. She showed me her fear and asked me to meet her there. We stood on the same floor at last. It was not a victory. It was a sisterhood I did not expect to find. Haven and Hem felt different now that it had been seen. It was no longer only a whisper in my chest. Tomorrow I would open my notebook and call the names, one by one. We would measure, we would choose, we would plan, slowly. I would make a schedule with David and keep my promise to go at a human pace. I thanked the night for Rosa and May, for Aunt Leela's brave gray, for the teenager who wanted long sleeves, and for the neighbor who needed a walking dress. I thanked it for every yes and every maybe. I thanked it for the polite no, too, because honesty keeps rooms clean. I thanked it for the way my children held me up without making a speech. I untied the twine on one leftover tag and held the little card in my hand. Haven and Hem, come home to yourself. The words were not big, but they were true enough to lean on. I set the card on the table, turned off the lamp, and listened to the gentle quiet of our house. If you are listening to me now, I want to say this plain and soft. Choose kindness, even when someone laughs. Hold your center the way a good seam holds a dress. Share your work without shouting. Let love do the loud work for you, in its own time, in its own voice. And if you are tired of tight things, if you are tired of clothes or moments that pinch, find your haven. It might be a room or a person. It might be a simple dress with deep pockets that let your hands rest. Whatever it is, come home to yourself. I will be here, stitching slowly, leaving the light on.